But I noticed something while sitting in that doctor's chair. The lens that you look through affects your vision. That's not rocket science. That's something we all know. But I think in life it works the same way. The lens that we look through is based upon what's going on around us. So if our pet elephant just died, we see the world a little bit differently. If we make an A on a test, we see the world a little bit differently. If our boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with us, you know what I mean? We look at the world with a depressive state of mind. If our team just wins the Super Bowl, we're thrilled to death and everything's happy. What you go through in life affects how you see, affects what you view. Therefore, I think it's important that we need the truth in our life. And not the truth that we give, not the truth that our friends say is the truth, because let's face it, sometimes our own feelings can be misleading. Sometimes what our friends say isn't always exactly the truth. I mean, let's face it, they don't have a college degree yet. And even if they had a college degree, doesn't mean they're right on everything. So what do we need to keep us looking straight with proper vision in times of heartache, in times of depression, in times of frustration, in times of complete joy? What do we need to keep us straight and narrow on the path that we're supposed to chase after? That's only God. That's only Him. Tonight, I'm here to tell you that God's grace is greater than your circumstances. Now, I know that's hard to understand. It's easy to listen to. But when you're faced with a negative situation, you respond differently. When you're faced with a positive situation, you respond differently. The lens that you're going through kind of shapes how you view, but it doesn't have to, because God's grace is more powerful than all of that. So tonight, I want you to learn a couple things. We have 2 points tonight, and I think they will meet us exactly where we're at, wherever we're at, whether we're on the mountaintop or whether we're in the darkness, in the shadow. God lights up the shadow. God chases after you, even if you're climbing up a mountain. That's how much He loves you. But I know that what we go through affects the way we live our life. And so tonight, let's jump right into it. I'm going to pull this over just a tad. Hopefully not too far. Whose water is this? Ooh. You got that out of a water fountain, didn't you? Gonna set that back down. All right, point number 1, you ready? Everybody put a number 1 in the air. Wave it like this. I would say wave it like you just don't care, but that's from an old song that's super way past its day. So y'all would be like, what's he talking about? I'm old, turning 30 this month. It's okay. Some of you get it. Point number 1, we're able to receive God's grace only to the extent we're able to recognize our need for it. That's lengthy. Let me read it again. We are able to receive God's grace only to the extent we are able to recognize our need for it. That's a big, fancy way of saying we can receive God's grace when we know we need it. I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I can get a little bit prideful. My stories get a little bit large. And I think, I don't have any flaws. I'm perfect. I'm exactly the person God has created me. I have a great chin, which I don't. Sometimes I wish it was stronger, like Tom Brady's, but I have a chin, so that's a good thing. Sometimes I don't see my own weakness. Sometimes I think I'm exactly who God intended me to be. Sometimes I think I am perfect, but there's a problem with that. If I think I'm super strong in all these different areas, I'm missing something. I'm missing the obvious. I'm missing that everybody else sees except for me. That is my own weakness. And they're there. As much as I want to hide them, as much as I want to put them in the closet and lock the door, they're there. They're there. So I have a choice to make. I can either recognize my weakness and plan to defeat that weakness, or I can cover up my weakness and say, oh, I'm good. I don't struggle. I'm perfect. I don't say bad things. No, I don't. I'm an angel when I speak. I don't get mad at other people. I don't. I'm nice to everybody. I don't call people things that they don't want to be called. I don't do any of that. I don't speak negative. Nope, not me. That might be Dustin James Wilson, but that's not Dustin Wilson. If I don't recognize my own weakness, how can I ever receive God's grace? You see, God is looking for someone with a humble heart, with a humble attitude, who says, you know what, God? You saw me in my imperfection. You saw me in my shortcoming. You saw me in that ugly sin that we learned about a couple weeks ago. And you came to rescue me. That means I need you. If I don't come to that conclusion, if I just think I'm perfect, I'm never going to understand that I need God's grace. And I think that's the problem with our world today. They think that what they do is completely fine. That what they choose to do, the decisions they do make, they think is completely fine and it doesn't hurt anybody. But if we were to be honest, that way of thinking will only get you to a place you don't want to go. So we need to learn from that. We are able to receive God's grace only to the extent we are able to recognize it. If you have your Bible, let's look together at 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 21 through 23. We have Paul writing to the Corinthian church, and it's kind of funny. I like this because Paul is about to admit out loud what he is about to do is not good, but then he does it anyways. Have y'all ever said this? I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Blah, 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 blah. Nom, 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 nom. Whatever you want to do. Yeah, we've been there. That's kind of what Paul is doing. He says this. Check it out. To my shame, I admit that what we were too weak. I'm going to start over. To my shame, I admit that we were too weak for that. Whatever anyone else dares to boast about, I'm speaking as a fool. He kind of admits it. I'm speaking as a fool. I also dared to boast about. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they Abraham's descendants? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I am out of my mind to talk like this. I am out of my mind to talk like this. I am more. I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, and been exposed to death again and again. What's Paul saying? Well, in order to know what Paul is saying, we first got to understand the context. Because these are just awesome quotes from Paul, but if we don't understand why he's speaking these awesome quotes, they're just quotes. Have you ever heard someone taken out of context? Like a president could be out speaking and giving a great speech on immigration, and then the next thing you know, the media is saying something completely different than what the president intended to say. We don't want to do that with the Bible, because if we do that with the Bible, we can come up with some twisted ways of thinking that aren't true. So Paul, he is writing to this church because because some false teachers entered into the scene and started teaching a gospel other than the gospel that Paul preached. And so they were twisting the words. They were doing things and leading people the wrong way. Instead of leading them to Jesus Christ, who knows where they were leading them? Just different directions, here, there. And so Paul gets with this. He says, okay, I see what these people are saying. Do you want to trust them or do you want to trust me? Because, hey, here's the thing. I'm from Abraham's descendants. I am a Hebrew. I am a Jew. I follow the law. I serve the one true God. I've been in prison for my faith. I've been flogged for my faith. I've been shipwrecked for my faith. I've gone to here and gone there for my faith. I have proof that I am a follower of Jesus Christ. And I'm boasting about this, even though I know that I shouldn't, even though that the Lord wouldn't do that himself. I'm boasting about this to prove a point to you, church. You need to follow the right gospel. I think Paul got his point across. When he kind of shares all of his experiences and what he's gone through, we see that Paul isn't just doing this just for show. That Paul isn't doing that just to stand on the stage in the middle of a circus with a lion tamer and a lion in the background and a big giant elephant and Dumbo flying through the ceiling. No, Paul understood what his faith was about, saw his faith lived it out himself, even to his own persecution. Would these religious leaders do that? Would these people teaching a false gospel, would they do that? No, I don't think they would. I think at the minute of persecution, they'd be like, okay, I'm good. I don't believe this gospel really that I'm preaching. I'm just saying it because people are looking at me, and I like that attention. That's why I go work at Hollywood, because people look at me, and I love it. Paul's saying, I know the truth, I know the gospel, and I want you to have it too. And yes, it's going to cause pain. Sometimes it's going to cause heartache. Sometimes we're going to be persecuted because of it. But I know God's grace is bigger than my circumstances, and I need God. Now, I know Paul's boasting here, but Paul understands something. He understands that he's not perfect. He understands that boasting, having a prideful spirit, it's not right. And honestly, I don't believe that he wants to write this in this moment, but he is writing it to prove a point. But that speaks to us. Paul understood his weaknesses. Paul understood his limitations. Was he a bit arrogant sometimes? Probably. Did his own personal view get in the way of the other disciples sometimes, and did it cause arguments? Certainly did with Peter. But yet, he allowed his own weakness to be made strong through Christ, and so he was able to go through persecution, go through floggings, and go through the big list of all that he goes through in the book of 2 Corinthians, and he keeps going. If you don't believe in the gospel you're chasing after, and you're going through all that, you're going to quit. You're going to give up. You're going to say, this is too hard. I'm going to go back to the sawmill and work like a lumberjack. But Paul keeps going. He keeps fighting. He keeps serving. And he keeps relying on the power of God to help him because he can't do it on his own. Tonight, I think we can learn from that. We can't do it on our own. We're not perfect enough. We have weakness. But God is even greater than our weakness. 2 Corinthians 12, 8 through 10. Paul says this, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. 3 times. He said, God, I don't want this, but your will be done. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in my weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. When you and I admit that we have our weakness, we can see Christ's strength. When you and I realize that we do sin, then we can see the power of Christ move in our life. When you and I can say, you know what, even though I did this for a purpose, it was still wrong, God can show up on the scene. But if we're proud, if we're boastful, if it's all about us, more important to our plan than God's plan, then it's going to be hard for us to receive grace. Because we don't think we need grace. And in reality, we do, and we're just fooling ourselves. So I encourage you, understand what your weaknesses are, and go to the source. Because God can take your weaknesses into your strengths. In high school, when I was your age, sitting in those seats on Wednesday nights, going to school, going to class, I'd had the bright idea to take calculus. Anyone take calculus? Couple? Calculus. Calculus is fun. No, it's not. It's hard. It's aggravating. It's frustrating. Thankfully, it follows a pattern. If it didn't follow a pattern, I would have less hair than what I do now. But calculus, I took that class, and I took it with a bunch of my buddies, so it helped make it a whole lot better. But at first it starts off being very difficult. It is a weakness. I somehow begin to figure things out. It begins to make sense to me. I wish I could tell you how. I don't really know. It just made sense, as the teacher would say it. And so I would put all these connection points in my head, and I keep doing this because it's fun. And so I started to get it, but I wasn't perfect. My friends, on the other hand, they were struggling with it. It was hard. They would make B's on their test. It was difficult, frustrating. And so we decided, because this class was challenging, we had to do something about it, because it caused our GPA to go down. And we didn't want that, because we were all fighting for the top 10% of our class, and we wanted to excel. And for a class to hold us back from where we're trying to go, we had to do something about that. We create this study group at my friend Ruben's house. He had a sweet little whiteboard. We could draw out the problems and begin to work those problems out. So we'd sit there every Monday, every Tuesday, every Thursday, and we would work on a calculus together, because we figured if we work on it together, when one person figures it out, he can explain it to the rest of the people. When the other person figures it out, he can explain it to the rest of the people. And so it was a good team game. We weren't cheating off of each other. We were just generally trying to get better. And so what would happen, I would figure out the problem. Then I would go to the whiteboard. I would start drawing it out and explain it so that we all understood kind of how we came to that conclusion. When I got stuck on a problem, my friend Hayden or my friend Ruben or someone else would go up to that whiteboard and draw out the problem until we got it all figured out. And then they would explain it to us. And it was a good system. We understood that we had a problem. If we wanted our GPA to continue to be good, we had to work together. Now, I know when test time comes around, we can't work together anymore. But by that time, we've put forth the hard work, we've put forth the dedication and the study to excel. We saw a weakness. We saw a need. And we did something about it. What would happen if we knew we were bad at calculus, but we didn't want to admit that to ourselves, and we stayed at home in our room? Instead of being happy while doing homework, because everybody's happy doing homework, right? Would be, if we didn't join together, if we stayed at our room, we would probably cry ourselves to sleep. We had a weakness, and we found a solution. To you have two choices. We can sit at home and we can cry because calculus is hard, or we can go to the source, those that can take your weakness and make it strong, and it can change our life. Now, I know what I want to do, but I'll let you handle what you want to do and how you want to handle it. Now, you know yourself inside and out. And if you don't, your spirit yearns in groanings that can't be expressed in human language, and God knows what you need. But I think it would be important for us to admit, saying, you know what, Dustin? I'm not perfect. You know what, Dustin? My belief system might not be where it needs to be. You know what, Dustin? I don't pray enough. I don't read my Bible enough. You know what, Dustin? I'm a very lustful person, and I look at things on the computer that I shouldn't be looking at. You say, you know what, Dustin? I call my parents bad names. I'm so negative all the time. No one wants to be around me. I think if we begin to admit our own weaknesses, we can go to God and say, God, I have this problem, and I can't fix it on my own. It's too hard to fix it on my own. So can you use that? Can you fix that? Can you make that problem better? And he can turn that weakness and turn it into a strength. And also, he can take that weakness and turn it into a story that can impact the rest of this world. Because honestly, the things that you go through, your hardships, the stories that you have in your life, that's just not for you. But that's for that person sitting beside you in your math class. That's for that wide receiver that you used to practice with, but then they moved you to the offensive line, and you don't get to see them as much anymore. That's for that buddy in the drama class who's struggling with depression. And everybody knows it, but no one wants to address it. And you have an opportunity to do so. Sometimes we go through things, and yes, it's weakness, and we need to recognize our weakness. But then we need to go to the source and say, God, you got to turn this into a strength. I know my flaws, and I know that you can help. And I think if you do that, you'll find something powerful. Which brings me to my next point. Point numero dos. Point number 2. Those are the only 2 languages that I know. We must trust God's goodness even when life is difficult. Because life will be difficult. It's part of how this world works. But even in the difficulties of life, even in the darkness of life, even in the shadows of life, God and His goodness is still on the throne. We must trust God's goodness even when life is difficult. Paul's life was difficult. I think many of you would agree tonight. It wasn't perfect. Paul found himself in prison. Paul found himself being beaten. Paul found himself on a shipwreck. Paul found himself all over the world, and Paul found himself without friends. Sometimes the people he was hanging around would just split, and he would be all by himself. Paul understood what difficulty in life looks like, probably even more than what we do. But yet he knew that even though life was hard, he still had God. And if he had God, he's content, perfectly content, because he has all he needs. So if you have your Bible, let's look at Romans chapter 8, verses 18 through 21. Paul's saying this, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into freedom and glory of the children of God. Our present frustrations, our present sufferings, our present difficulties, they don't compare to what's coming. They don't compare to eternity with Jesus Christ. Because once we reach eternity, there's going to be no more tears, no more pain, no more sorrow. And I promise you, I'm ready for that. But I know that that's not tomorrow. That's a little bit further down the line. So it's important for me to keep things in proper perspective, to look through the proper lens, not let situations dictate the way I live my life, but to keep focus on what matters. What matters? God, Jesus Christ, eternity, what that looks like. I don't want to spend eternity in hell away from God. I don't know what's worse, burning in the lake of fire or being without God. I take that back. I do know what's worse. I'm not worried about the fire. I'm worried about spending my entire creation away from God. That just sounds terrible to me because God is my everything. God is my rock. He's my salvation. He is there in the darkest hour as well as the best hour. I don't want to live life away from God because He is real. No matter what anyone else says, there's so much proof that goes into what God can do. I know He's real, and I don't want to spend eternity away from Him. And I think Paul was right there. He said, you know what? I'm suffering. I'm hurting. The world, it's hurting too, right along with me. And so it's not unique to just the Christian culture. No, the rest of the world is hurting too because of the sin of Adam and Eve and how it was birthed into this world and started changing this world and made this world into an ugly place. And it's hard. Yes, it's hard. But with Christ, we have hope that we can look to the future and that it's so worth it. Heaven is so worth it. Jesus Christ is so worth it. So if we keep that in proper perspective, if we look to that, even in our pain, we know that we can make it to the other side of that mountain. we can make it. Jay, if you could come to the stage tonight. Sorry, I was looking everywhere. I was like, he's not in the sound booth. He's not over there with Amy and Eric. Where's he at? He's right there. Now, I know that life can be hard. But the difficulties of life, God's grace is still greater. And God can be your rescue. No one's immune to hard times, dark times. Sometimes we find ourselves in those moments. Whether it be us losing an argument, and the argument frustrating us and controlling us. Whether it be losing a close friend who we thought had our back, and they didn't. Whether it be someone that we loved, someone that we respected, someone we looked up to. Maybe they did us wrong. Or maybe someone that was very close passed away and we don't get to see them any longer. Or maybe you just find yourself kind of in the depression of life because sometimes we get there and we don't know how to escape this darkness. Tonight, I'm here to tell you that God will reach down and He'll sustain you in the darkness. Don't lose hope. Don't ever lose hope. I want to share with you a story of when I was in a dark time. And it wasn't because of sin. It was just a dark moment. You know, I was coaching volleyball and loved it. I was becoming a good coach, but there was a problem. I was working at a Christian school, and the Christian school was great. They were the best staff, the best people I could ever work with. But I also had another job, and that job took priority because it was my number one source of income. And although we had a clear understanding that I was going to work this job and then also coach, it conflicted. And it conflicted a lot. And so one day I was coaching a tournament because that's what I was supposed to do. I was helping out teenagers, loving on teenagers, coaching my own teenagers that were in my own youth group. And I looked down and I received 1 phone call, 2 phone calls, 3 phone calls, 25 phone calls, some nasty emails, nasty voicemails. And I thought to myself, man, I never thought working in a church would be so difficult. I thought people in leadership were supposed to love and help and realize that sometimes people make mistakes. And it was a hard time. It was a tough time. In those moments, you're just thinking, you know, did God really send me here? Is God really here in this moment? Because I feel like I'm being beat over by leadership, and it's hard, and it hurts, and it's causing pain, and it's causing me to question things, and it's causing me to wonder if I'm truly called to student ministry. It was a dark time. In those dark moments, I think God is closer to us than He ever has been. You know, He just was speaking to my life, said, Dustin, this is what I called you to do. Dustin, I love you. Dustin, I'm here for you. I know things might not always go the way you expect them to go, but I'm here for you. And I'm going to carry you. And I'm going to walk with you through. And I'm going to give you hope. And I'm going to be your future. And I'm going to be your forever. Wherever you go, Dustin, I am right there with you. But most importantly, I am leading you. Follow me. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to hurt. Yes, there's going to be pain. But what I have for you is so much better. So hang on. Hang on. Sometimes in life it feels like we're hanging onto a rope trying to hold on to God, and we think that we're just about to let go. But in reality, I think it kind of works the opposite. I think God is holding on to us, saying, child, I got you. Let go of the rope. Child, you're in my hands. It's okay to let go. I'm right here. You don't have to fly anywhere. You don't have to go anywhere. I'm right here every step of the way. In your darkest hour, God is right there for you. And He will never leave you, and He will never forsake you. So whether we need to recognize our own sin tonight, recognize our weakness, or whether we're in a dark circumstance in this life, I want you to know this. God is here. God is here.